Capitalism is the greatest social technology ever created, but I believe that it is manifestly dishonest to both believe that capitalism is the greatest social technology ever invented, but also believe that the whole system will come tumbling down if capitalists are required to pay their workers enough to get by without food stamps. This is bullshit. There is no excuse for any company in America to pay their workers so little that they need Medicaid and rent assistance. That's not capitalism, that's socialism for the rich. My name is Nick Hanauer, and I'm both a serial technology entrepreneur and venture capitalist, but I'm also a civic activist. The thing about inequality is that every reasonable economy has to have some. That's not in dispute. The question is, how much should you have and how quickly should it change? And really the sort of thing that got me to start to care about this was realizing in 2007 or so that the top 1% of Americans in 1980 shared only about 8% of national income, but by 2007 that number had grown to almost 22%, while the income of the share of the bottom 50% had fallen from about 17.5 to about 12. And it doesn't take a mathematical genius to see that if that trend continues, we will no longer have a capitalist economy or a democracy, we'll have a feudal system. And to be clear, since then it's only gotten worse. The sort of national trends that have been slowly eroding and eviscerating the middle class have been proceeding for a long time, and that ideological framework got really rolling under Reagan, and essentially the rest is history. And so we have endured 40 years of trickle-down economics, and that is why largely our democracy is disintegrating today. Make no mistake, if you're a middle-class person and feel like the country has left you behind, that is an objective truth. And that didn't happen by accident. Leaders on the left and right have enacted policies that have impoverished most people in the middle and have massively enriched people like me. When people are that angry, they lash out, and we elected the leader who was lashing out too, and he happened to be Donald Trump. He's a narcissistic thug, and the quicker he's gone, the better. But to be absolutely clear and honest, he is not the cause of the trouble, he's a symptom of the trouble. The tax bill that the Republicans passed a few months ago was just a giant theft from the middle class to the very rich.
Ultimately, what does it mean? It means jobs, 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 jobs.
If there was a shred of truth to the idea that tax cuts for rich people and corporations would somehow increase growth, then we would have had enormous amounts of jobs and growth and wage increases already, because corporate profits are already twice as high as they were. And a tiny fraction of what companies could be investing is actually invested. The vast majority of the cash flows are simply enriching the very rich already. If it was me, I would radically increase corporate tax rates, because I don't think that makes American companies less competitive. I think it makes them more competitive because it forces them to invest in themselves and in the country rather than paying taxes. Rich people no more create jobs than farmers create tomatoes. The economy generates jobs, not rich people. And the more money consumers have, the more jobs that are created, because people buy things, and people like me are required to hire people in order to meet that demand. And so this whole idea that the rich are job creators, again, is just another way of instantiating a narrative that ultimately means we matter and you don't. It's an intimidation tactic masquerading as economic theory. It is exactly the same as claiming that white people are superior to people of color. If you accept that as a biological fact, then there are a bunch of norms that are acceptable, like slavery and other things. The American public needs to come to terms with this and start pushing back against these lies. If people don't have any money, who will buy the stuff? What's happened to our country, and one of the big reasons the middle class has declined, is that in the day, 40 years ago, about 65% of workers were entitled to overtime if they worked more than 40 hours a week. Today, if you're salaried, that number is just 8%. The overtime threshold is something that people really don't understand very well, but it is the indispensable labor protection for middle class people. And here's why. If you go to work for a Jack in the Box or something like that, and your boss pitches you a fake title like assistant manager, they can make you work 70 hours a week without paying you overtime. And here's why that's terrible, is if you do that 30 or 40 or 50 million times across the economy, you have turned 3 jobs at 40 hours a week into 2 jobs at 60 hours a week millions of times. And that's a way to turn 60 million jobs into 40 million jobs and take 20 million jobs out of the economy. And so nobody makes overtime anymore. The idea that raising wages kills jobs flies in the face of all common sense. There's no earthly reason why Walmart couldn't pay every single worker enough to lead a dignified middle-class life without government assistance. The reason they don't is they choose not to, and no one has confronted that. It's egregious. If you put me in charge of the country, what I would not do is implement the minimum wage geographically, which is what we have largely done. If you go to a small town, it's not dominated by the local department store. It's the Walmart or the Walgreens or the Bank of America or whatever it is that employs people. And so if it was me, what I would do is implement labor standards like the minimum wage, not by geography, but by company size. This is not to penalize the biggest companies, but to hold them to the standard that they should be held to, which is, congratulations, you're a giant, profitable multinational corporation. Now act like one. When I start talking about raising wages to my wealthy friends and CEOs, mostly they look at their shoes. But nobody wants to face the truth. If past is prologue, they're going to wake up after everything gets burned down and then be like, oh, geez, we should do something different. The simple truth is that our country will not be better until people feel better, and they're not going to feel better until they do better, and they're not going to do better, and here's the hard part, until we pay them more. And everything else in politics is either a distraction or a lie. And there are no examples in human history of a society that is that unequal, that is not either in revolution or in an authoritarian police state. We are trending dangerously towards an authoritarian police state today. This is not a partisan issue. The truth is that a thriving middle class creates growth, not the other way around. And we all, again, Democrats and Republicans, should hold our elected leaders to the standard of enacting policies that benefit working class and middle class people directly. Not cutting taxes for rich people and hoping that it'll trickle down, but raising wages for middle income people. That's what we should unite around. And that's what a teacher or a firefighter or a police officer or whoever you are, that is what you can do. You can call your elected representative and demand those policies and not get conned by this trickle-down nonsense that raising wages kills jobs. It doesn't. It's just a thing rich people say to poor people to keep rich people rich and poor people poor. It's a lie. Don't believe it.